I still personally find it quite crazy that our society expects that, we are going to give up our time completely and we don't have autonomy of our own time. Essentially, our time is going to be controlled by a business or an organization. And one of the massive benefits of remote work is that people feel that they can manage their own time when they get that time back. So they're not commuting anymore. They're not wasting that time in the morning on getting into the office. They've got more time in the evenings. They're then doing things that they enjoy. So they're essentially trading things that they don't enjoy so much, things that potentially make them feel negative, for things that they really love and make them feel positive.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Plumm Pod, where we talk about all things HR and mental health. I'm your host, Georgia, and founder of Access HR. On today's episode, I'm joined by Grace Nichols, remote work expert, as we dig deeper into the reality, the reason, and the pushback for remote work. Grace, hello. Today, we are going to talk about something that is very topical, and you are an expert in the space. But before we get into it, I really want to set the scene for our listeners. And there's a question that I ask every single guest. And the question is, was HR part of the plan, or did this happen by chance?
So does anyone ever say it was part of the plan?
So far, I haven't had it. I'm still waiting. Maybe one day, I don't know.
So it's an interesting story for me, actually. No, it wasn't part of the plan. What happened? So I always wanted to be in law. I wanted to be a barrister. That was my kind of dream. That's what I wanted to do since I was little. So I applied to study law, got accepted, was ready to go to uni, turned up on the day, the induction day, and they were like, sorry, we've enrolled you onto business management. At which point, I'd studied business for AS, didn't really like it, didn't really enjoy it, which is quite interesting considering what I'm doing now. So it was the year that the fees were due to go up the following year. So I had a choice. It was either wait because the law degree was full. So it was wait and basically put my life on hold for an entire year and then pay the fees, which were, I think, like double or maybe more, or just crack on with a business degree. And they said that I could, contest it and I might get moved on to the course. So that's what I did. Signed up to the course, started uni, studied business management. A year went by before they came back to me with anything. And at that point, I'd already done a year. So I was thinking, well, I'll just stick with this, but how can I make it into something that I really enjoy? And for me, the reason I wanted to go into law was to help people and work with people and support people. So at that point, I thought, right, what can I do here? So I decided to kind of specialize in HR. I also thought, okay, how can I make this like super interesting for myself? So I decided to learn Mandarin because that was a business language, top business language. And I thought, it'll give me something else to do. So I signed up to that as well, and I started learning to speak Mandarin, got to GCSE level, which I'm actually really proud of.
That's incredible.
So hard, yeah. And then at that point, I met somebody there who was working for a company that I'd always wanted to work for, and got chatting to him and said, is there any chance of a placement with you? And he said, yeah, absolutely, you can come and join our HR team. So joined the HR team on placement, and then I got my first HR job a couple of months later when I graduated.
Wow. So whilst being at uni and studying, you also decided to pick up Mandarin.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Do you use that within your day-to-day life at the moment?
No. The thing with language, you forget it really easily if you're not practicing. And it's not the kind of thing that you can practice easily, kind of especially here. Although I do actually, one of my best friends now, we met at Mandarin lessons. So occasionally we like bust a few words out. Throw them out there. But no, I haven't really used it since. But essentially, that's how I got into my HR career, really, from the guy that I met there. So kind of always grateful to have met him.
And that's led you to where you are today, spent your whole time throughout HR?
Yeah, so I joined that company, stayed there for quite a few years, started in learning and development, always loved that kind of side of things, the nicer side of HR, I like to say. Did a lot of leadership development, exec development, that kind of side of things. But then also I, do all of the other bits in HR as well, the generalist stuff too. So yeah, been in HR the whole time.
Amazing. And for today, we're really going to focus on remote work.
Yeah.
Very topical, especially post-COVID and the time in which we're recording this in 2025, there's a lot of return to the office mandates that are happening. For a first off, what has made you specialise as a remote work expert?
So I think for me, it comes from a personal place. So I was always kind of told, and I think in this society we are told that the right thing to do is to go into a corporate,
Hmm.
to work your way up. That's how you're going to progress in your career, and that's what I felt I needed to do. So that's what I did, and I've always been somebody that's really kind of pushed and wanted to learn more. I absolutely love learning, hence doing Mandarin while I was studying as well. And I just feel like I was pushing a lot, and I got to a point where I started having really bad migraines. I was having migraines for sometimes 2 weeks at a time. Couldn't get rid of them. The doctor was prescribing me beta blockers, which I didn't want to take because I didn't want to medicate myself that way. And then a lot of stuff happened in the role that I was in at that time, and I decided that I was going to essentially take voluntary redundancy because I felt like I needed a break. But I still didn't think it was to do with my job. I couldn't pinpoint it. I didn't think it was stress because I felt like that's what I'd always wanted. I was doing really well in my career. I thought that's what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I quit and started to get that kind of freedom, I realized that actually it was my job that was causing so much stress that was making me feel like that. So at that point, I decided that I needed to really make some changes. And the changes meant for me flexibility, being able to manage my own time, being able to work with people that I really wanted to work with and I'd chosen to work with. So I decided that I needed to do my own thing, and that looked remote for me.
And what are the benefits that businesses can face by having a remote team?
So I still personally find it quite crazy that our society expects that, we are going to give up our time completely and we don't have autonomy of our own time. Essentially, our time is going to be controlled by a business or an organization. And there are loads of different books out there that talk about how true success for a lot of people is being able to manage their own time, right? So one of the massive benefits of remote work is that people feel that they can manage their own time when they get that time back. So they're not commuting anymore. They're not wasting that time in the morning on getting into the office. They've got more time in the evenings. They're then doing things that they enjoy. So they're essentially trading things that they don't enjoy so much, things that potentially make them feel negative, for things that they really love and make them feel positive. And then what we see is a massive increase then in productivity. We know that if your employees are happy and they're feeling more productive, then there's going to be a higher output for the business as well. So that's something that's absolutely huge for both. The other thing is access to global talent. Like this one, I just think is so incredible. And it's probably one of the biggest benefits, because when you've got access to such a huge talent pool, it means that you've got so much diversity of thought, innovation is a lot higher, creativity is a lot higher, and you've got perspectives of people potentially from all over the world that are living, in different cultures, completely different lives, and they're used to different things, and they can bring that into the business.
I've definitely noticed
Mm.
such a rise post-COVID, and potentially it was happening before COVID, but not on the same scale. Since we were all, unfortunately, in a situation where we had no choice but for remote work,
Yeah.
global talent is now at our fingertips.
Yeah.
And it is so easy, and I completely agree, the talent pool is limitless.
Yeah.
Whereas before we potentially thought we were a bit more limited. Do you find that your clients that you speak to are resistant to remote work because they want people in the office for that physical in-person presence?
So, yes, sometimes. But I think this is, again, it's a really interesting one, right? Now, the way that I think about it is some companies, they started their company wanting everybody to be in the office. That's what their values were in one way, shape, or form, right? Then you had employees that joined that company on the basis that they were going to be in the office 5 days a week. And what's happened now is that those companies were absolutely forced to, go fully remote because it was a choice between either your company operates or it doesn't during COVID. They didn't necessarily want that to be the case, and they weren't set up at all impossible to run fully remotely, which meant that, issues and things like that have kind of arisen. And then I think for employees as well, people have now seen the level of freedom and flexibility that they can have. And also with COVID, we have to consider, the impact that had on people just generally and personally, and thinking about the fact that we were locked up for so long. We didn't know that could be taken away and our freedom could be taken away from us so easily. So the fact that people have seen that is now meaning that a lot of people want to go out and really kind of live their life, and they want to be able to go and work from anywhere. They want to be able to explore the world. So the reason that I believe, and based on the companies that I work with, that people aren't on board is because they're thinking we need to get back to pre-COVID times. But they haven't considered what pre-COVID times actually mean. Right? What does that mean for them? Because if their output as a team and for the business is the same or if not better, because as you say, we've seen higher productivity from people working from home, then what does that mean? And they haven't considered the fact that actually their values as an organisation may need to shift and change, and they need to go back and have some of those difficult conversations to say, why are we trying to force people to come back into the office? What is the reason for this? And I think that, we're then seeing that employees are really enjoying that freedom. They're more productive. They're happier. There's so much going on there. And when people are feeling forced to come back into the office, that's then causing other problems. And they're questioning, why? Why is this happening? Why is this required? Because, if you want to look at it from a skeptical perspective, the business operated just fine when it worked for the business. It was all fine when you needed us to work throughout COVID. And now all of a sudden you want us to come back in. So, yeah, that's causing a challenge.
And what's the biggest mistake that you're seeing with companies who are trying to transition back into a fully office environment?
Yeah, so a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
I would say the first one is something that we just touched on, which is not reevaluating what is important to them as a business, but also they're not working with their employees to understand how they're feeling about potentially coming back in, not asking the conversation, because there are also people that do want to come back into the office as well. We need to be mindful of that. So actually there is a push for hybrid, not so much for fully remote. So I think one of the main challenges is that they're not having that kind of reevaluation. They're not then communicating with the teams the reason why they want them to come back in. And that causes a problem because people are feeling forced and they're feeling like it's, they're then suddenly being micromanaged when they've had all of this freedom.
I really resonate with that. And more often than not, it's the communication around the why that isn't given to our people, and potentially the employers not knowing the why and thinking, well, I'm seeing these, large organizations returning back to the office. We should be doing the same because that's what productivity is. I know this is all over, and as we're having this episode, as I said before, very, very topical, but I think it's got to work for your team, your company. I am a fan of hybrid working. Personally, I thrive in different environments. I really like that in-person connection. And this may be controversial and maybe not everybody's going to agree, but I think there's certain points in your career where you can benefit from being in person and having that human interaction, especially for development.
Yeah.
In particular, I personally think when you are more junior in your career and when you're starting with a new company, the best way that I've been able to really understand the culture and essence of a company is by having that human interaction with a blend of still being able to work from home with that hybrid approach. I don't know if you've seen a difference with that at people's stages in their careers.
Do you know what? It's a very interesting one. I get a lot of people come to me that want to work one-to-one to look for a fully remote role that are just starting out in their career. And I always recommend to them, firstly, I won't work with them because I feel exactly the same as you. I think it's really important that people are exposed to everything about an office, different personalities, being around their directors as well, especially when you're starting out, because that can feel quite nerve-wracking. And I think it's really good to just get used to being in the presence of other people. You can learn so much in person, depending on what industry you're in. Collaboration is incredibly important in any industry, but especially in the creative industries, it's even more important to do that. So yeah, I completely agree with you. But I think one of the massive benefits of having hybrid as well is that people that are just starting out in their career, they can have a bit of both. They can learn the fully remote skills. They can learn how to use all the platforms. They can learn how to be really adaptable, really organized with their own time. But then they can also learn all of those other skills that we've just talked about in the office as well. So I think actually what we're going to see is people that are kind of a lot further forward in their career because they've had those two experiences.
And to have those experiences, the employer has to be open to it and build their business. There's a lot of buzzwords at the moment around remote first companies and being remote friendly. But could you break down the difference for me? What's the difference between being remote first compared to remote friendly?
So remote first is where a company is built from the foundations upwards as an organization that knows that there is going to be no office. So it might be that people come into an office, maybe, once every couple of months, depending on whether the company is global or how they're operating. But what it means essentially is that all information, all communication, all growth opportunities, everything is kind of designed to make sure that people that are remote all over the world can access it. Whereas people that are running remote friendly companies, we tend to see this as more of a kind of hybrid, right? Those companies have been created as kind of office centric. So what we're seeing with companies like that is that they are the ones that are having the challenges now because all of their processes and systems are set up to be in office. And this means that people are missing out on really important information. It can mean that, those kind of big conversations are happening in person rather than actually being able to happen kind of remotely over Teams, Zoom, whatever it is that they're using. And there's still that kind of old school way of thinking as well, where time in the office equals performance and equals better performance. And so, remote friendly companies kind of lean more towards that, I would say. But a lot of them are in a shift. So they are trying to move more towards remote. But it's just a case of doing a bit of an overhaul of everything they got going on, really. I say just a case.
Quite a lot. Sounds easy.
Yeah.
And I think as well, for people who are in that middle ground of really establishing, okay, we are a remote friendly company, we're still embodying that hybrid approach. How do we make sure our practices, our policies and procedures reflect that? Because you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
What we don't want is, because you're not in the office on a Tuesday and your day is a Wednesday, you've missed out on such a key conversation that you then feel disconnected.
Yeah.
So do you have any examples of how a remote first company has got that right?
Communication is so key in remote organizations. And so I think making sure that, you are having really regular check-ins with your team, making sure that HR are really supportive of line managers so that line managers are able to support their teams and make sure that they're having those really kind of transparent conversations, making sure that days that are in the office are intentional. And when days are intentional, this can look like things like growth opportunities, right? So they could be doing a workshop and asking members of the team to actually lead different parts of that workshop. So I've worked with companies that are doing things that are more like that. They're incentivizing those days by saying it's going to be a team day, we're going to collaborate, and then looking for areas that they can support their teams and grow their teams on those days. Companies that are doing mentor schemes as well and things like that have worked really well because it encourages people to come in because they want to be there, they want that support. And then they can do that in person because, like you say, collaboration is so important and being in person is also so important. We're humans, so we do need that. but we don't need it all the time.
And what response have you had to the mentoring?
Yeah, it's great. I think it's really, really great. And I think, personally, I have a mentor. I actually did a post about this on LinkedIn the other day. And our relationship was fully remote for about a year, just over a year. And it worked really well. But I think, it is really good to do that stuff in person as well, because you get to know somebody on a different level.
There's things that, unfortunately, I mean, we may be having this conversation a year from now and we have the metaverse and we have VR to contend with, but that in-person understanding social cues and mannerisms and facial expressions, we can't sometimes get that through virtual Teams calls or Google Meets, whatever the platform of choice is.
Yeah.
That way we can then really get to understand behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the blended approach, in my opinion, is better. But we need to have the comms around that.
Yeah.
Why are we in the office? What is the intention behind this meeting? Are we doing this for the right reasons rather than to be in the office for the sake of the office? There's nothing worse than the posts that you see online where one person has gone into the office and nobody else is there, because there's no communication around the schedule. And it's asking ourselves as a company, why? Why are we bringing people in so that everyone's on the same page?
And I think it's also the environment. So that's incredibly important. And, we had a workforce of people that knew that they were going to be in an office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And when I think of my experiences, it was normal for people to bring a blanket into the office or a hot water bottle because it was freezing and we couldn't change the temperature. Like, we had the roof falling down at times. I think we had asbestos in the roof in one place I worked in. So the environment was something that we just kind of put up with. And then what we've seen is people that have been working from home or people that have been working from anywhere in the world, their environment's completely changed and they've had to get used to what that looks like, for them and what is going to help them to be really productive. And some people, like completely different things. For me, it's lots of daylight, lots of plants, and usually working in Bali is where I like to work the most.
Yeah.
But I think the problem then is that, companies have downsized because they didn't want to pay all of the rent and they didn't need to do that throughout COVID. And so now when people are being asked to go back into the office, in some cases, there's not even enough space for them to sit. People are having to pull chairs from the kitchen. It's not proper equipment that they're provided with. And these things might sound like small things, but they're not, because it affects the morale. And when people have been forced to go back in, there's nowhere to park, there's nowhere to sit. They don't have the right equipment that they actually need to be able to do their job properly. As you say, nobody else has turned up because nothing's being kind of organized properly and people decided they didn't want to be there. So I think companies really need to consider that as well. How can they make it so that people come in and their environment is really nice? It's a good environment that they're going to be productive in and that they want to work from.
The final thing that you just said then, an environment that they want to work in.
Yeah.
I think the companies who have got hybrid working right have really prioritized and focused on that.
Yeah.
The environment stimulates them. It enables them to thrive and innovate. And what I'm also noticed is a lot of companies, just like what we've got here in the studio, we've got plants, we've got daylight. And it's attractive for people to want to come into the office where they don't feel like they're being forced.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, a lot of people want to go into the office, but they also want the choice alternatively with work from home days or any other benefit that they can get within that.
Yeah. And also, they want to know what they can do, what they are actually able to do.
As business leaders, do we want to be spending a lot of our time on the low-level tasks of lunch, things like that? Or should we be focused on the more important thing here, the output?
Yeah.
Compared to sitting in the office 9 to 5. That doesn't demonstrate productivity. It's presenteeism rather than anything else, which is an issue in itself.
And it's always something that I've found completely crazy. So even when I first started out in my career, I remember, and I didn't say anything at the time because I wasn't confident enough, But I remember one of the directors used to sit really near in the office, and it was one of those cultures where everyone would get in at 7 a.m. or 7:30 and wouldn't leave until 7 p.m. But people that were in the office, people that were present, were the ones that were put forward for promotion. Those were the ones that were viewed to be performing the best. And I used to think, this is crazy. For me, I'm looking at those people thinking, are you at capacity? Is there a problem? Is there something that you need support with? Obviously, being in a HR function as well, more mindful of the fact that if somebody is working for 12 hours a day, there's something going on. And then the second thing is, are you being efficient? And so when people are working from home or they're working fully remotely, we're seeing that because they're happy in their environment, because they're able to manage their time, they are then being more productive. I think part of it as well is feeling like the company does genuinely care about them and their well-being. And when you feel your company cares about you, you're likely to work harder because you care about the company back. So I think it comes back around, you know.
And what's one of the biggest fears that employers have with remote working?
I think it is that people aren't going to work. So there is very much a kind of stigma attached to remote working or working from home, that people just sit around in their pajamas all day and do nothing. And this frustrates me so much because I know so many people, myself included, and I know we've discussed this before as well. When you're working in an environment you love, you work more and you enjoy it. So I think for leaders, that's one of the biggest things. It's that people aren't going to be working. They're not going to be doing what they should be doing. There's no visibility of them. So the concern is, what's going on? I don't know what's going on with my team. But obviously there are ways to counteract that.
And essentially it comes down to trust.
Yeah.
Which I also think, if you don't trust the person, why have you hired them in the first place?
Yeah.
And don't penalise other people in the company if there's one person.
Yeah.
Don't send an undertone message of a return to office mandate.
Yeah.
We need to address individuals rather than as a collective. Sadly, I've only got one more question, which is about you and your career. And the question is, looking back on your career, what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
Oh, good one. So for me, it would be to know that if you are in a room and you've been invited into that room, a meeting, whatever it is in your professional career, you're there because people think that you can add value. And if you've got stuff to say, then share it because people do want to hear it. Be confident in that and challenge, because usually a lot of other people are sitting there feeling like they can't ask questions as well. And so it could open up the floor to other people too. I think that's it. When you first start out in your career, I know for me personally, I wasn't massively confident in a male-dominated industry as well. I used to find it quite difficult to speak up. And yeah, I wish I could go back and give myself that because it really helps you in your career as well.
I definitely know a lot of HR professionals will resonate with that. We want to have a voice, and sometimes we question, should we be in that room? And the reality is we absolutely should be, and we should be from the start. Grace, thank you so much. I also am really glad that we spoke around remote working and the why piece. I think that's a really big takeaway from today's episode. Understanding internally why. Why are we wanting to make this happen? If it's hybrid, why? If it's remote, why? And being intentional. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Like this episode? Click here for more HR talk. And if you're just catching up, check out our previous episodes right here.